Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Picture This, Home and Community. I am Ronnie Curry, Books for Youth Associate Editor at Booklist. I am going to start out with some housekeeping, and then we will hear from today's amazing guests. Before we begin, I will go over some technical details. So links to today's slide presentation and title list were included in the reminder email you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download them, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the links located there. You can also download the slides and title list by copying the URLs on this screen into your web browser. If you are in the audience, you are in listen-only mode, but we definitely welcome any questions that you might have. So on the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a button for Q&A. So if you have a question or if you need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and a box will pop up and you can type your message in there. We at Booklist will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we will pass along all your other questions to the panelists. If we don't have time to get to all the questions in the Q&A today, they will have the chance to follow up with your questions after the webinar. And last but not least, Booklist is offering closed captioning on all of our webinars. So to enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the live transcript icon on the toolbar that I mentioned before. From there, you can select show or hide subtitles from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by selecting subtitle settings. Okay, so today we will be hearing about 4 new picture books that look at the concepts of what and who are home and community for young readers. We will have the pleasure of hearing from 4 talented illustrators, Kevin Henkes, Dan Santat, Leanne Cho, and Mora, on how their art processes were informed by these themes and how creativity has given them a sense of home throughout their careers, and particularly in the last year. After their presentations, we will have a Q&A, so get your questions in ahead of time, as I instructed before. So thank you for being here, artists. And first up, we are going to hear from Dan Santat. Dan is a #1 New York Times bestselling author illustrator of more than 100 titles, including The Adventures of Beagle, The Unimaginary Friend, which won the Caldecott Medal in 2015. He is also the creator of the Disney animated hit The Replacements. This fall, Dan lends his talents to the moving and inspiring tribute to childhood, Bear is a Bear, with words by Jonathan Stutzman. Take it away, Dan.
Hi, thank you very much. Hello, my name is Dan Santat. I've been in this business for about 18 years. And today I'm going to be talking about this book that I did with the wonderful Mr. Jonathan Stutzman called Bear is a Bear. So let me just share a little bit about what Bear is a Bear is about. The story is about a little girl and her bear. I did like this idea of this child with this big giant bear that really grows up with her throughout life and helps experience all these moments that are really meaningful to her, almost kind of working like this big furry parent at first, you know, a very furry play friend, if you will. And as time goes on, this bear just becomes her best friend, you know, playing pirates and, you know, trick-or-treating. Playing with the chalk art, that's something that I actually used to do as a kid. When I think about my own childhood, a lot of fond memories come from my mom just buying me markers. And, you know, back in the day when you had computer paper that had the little holes on the side, you would just perforate those and just draw whatever was on TV or a newspaper. And, you know, since this topic is about home, I will be talking a little bit about inspirations that I had for this project. You know, and Jonathan integrated some beautiful lines of text that really was open for me to interpret. And in this case, there's a line here that says, "Bear is a tissue." And that could have gone in many different directions. And I thought that it would have been a great opportunity to use that as a line of text to just kind of honor the beauty of, being alone and reading. And so while I was working on this project, I was watching Frances Ha's version of Little Women, and I was just obsessed with that movie. I just thought it was an amazing adaptation of the book. And as an homage, I worked the title of the book into Bear is a Bear. And the bear shares other moments, shares the day she graduates, and at this point she's a young woman. And then she eventually heads off to college, and she brings her giant bear with her to college in her tiny dorm. And then as time goes on, when she's starting to move on with her life and she's doing different things, there's this gap in their relationship. She's finding other interests. She's motivated to do other things, and the bear's feeling a little less wanted, less needed. I was an only child, so when I was heading off to college, I think it harkens to my own mother, who was really sad about the day I left for college. And this is something that like my mom could probably relate to, just like, oh, don't worry, someday I'm just gonna go away and you won't have to worry about me anymore, which is a very mom thing to do. But Bear is a memory, just not feeling wanted. I think there's something that connects with maybe just not having that genuine time that you remembered having when you were younger. I know I'm starting to feel that with my own kids, because now they go out, hang out with their teenage friends, and they're watching shows on Netflix, and I come in and I'm checking on them. They're like, leave me alone, Dad. And then there's this moment here where everything is just tucked away in an attic. And so this gets to the point of where I found a lot of my inspiration. This project came to me at a very interesting time. My father passed away, and his last dying wish was that I buy a house for my mother to live in with us. And now, I was living in another home. It wasn't big enough to accommodate my mom. And when we're talking about the topic of home, what made it particularly difficult was, we had done a lot of work to the home. There were things about it that were unique to us, and we just felt like we were losing part of our soul because we worked so hard, building this place. And as the time went on, it really hit me when I started tearing down my studio to move into the new house. And at first I thought it was the idea of the space being the home. And what I really learned after having to pack things up and move is that the house isn't about stuff. We only moved about 3 miles away from the old house, and you don't want to move every little thing. I think if any of you have ever moved before, there is that point of moving where the only thing left are like little rubber bands and pennies in the ground, and you're just like throwing everything in a garbage bag, just thinking like, I'm just going to sort this out later. You just realize that there are some things that you just don't need eventually. And it really helps when you can come to terms with parting with those things you don't need, and you only keep the essential things that you find are essential to a home. And so what are those things? I spent a lot of time gardening. I really love my plants, and we actually kept the house, so we're renting it out, but I didn't trust the renters to take care of my plants. So I dug up all the plants in my backyard, and I packed them in pots, and I rented a U-Haul truck, and I brought my little leafy family with us to the new home, and I planted them back in the house because there's, for those of you who are big gardeners, who like to garden, there is a empathy that you develop with these plants that they feel like they're your children in a way, because you spend a lot of time caring for them and feeding them and watering them and giving them lots of sun. And there's just this connection you have eventually where you're thinking like, well, I don't want anything to happen to you. And and you have a history, and that's really ultimately what it is about a home. It's having a history. You know, and what makes me comfortable is being surrounded by, you know, the work of other friends that I've had, you know, who work in the business, and integrating that in my studio and making it, you know, feel like a home. And so going back to the story, we have this moment when the bear is uncovered out of the box again. But at this point, the little girl is now a woman. But the woman introduces her daughter to the bear. And now the bear is shocked because he's been tucked away for so long. He didn't know what happened. And it turns out that the mom is now giving the bear to her daughter. And now the bear is brand new. It's moved into a new place. It's found a new family. It's settling back in. It's going back to its same old routine. And that's really the big thing about the house. Because even despite moving back into this new house, it didn't really feel familiar to me until I actually lived in it. And there's certain things that really don't make it feel like a home. Like when you're unpacking a kitchen, for instance, and you're trying to find the silverware, but you don't know where you packed it. You know, you don't know which drawer it is. And so you have to get reacquainted to these routines. And that really is what a home is. And in the end, you find out that this bear is her teddy bear. And that's, to me, just the sentimentality of these items. It's not about the item itself, but it's the memories that are encapsulated inside it. And originally when I worked on this book, the manuscript just really felt like it was supposed to be about a girl and her teddy bear. And I felt like there was a magic behind it that wasn't seen from the point of view of an actual girl, you know, a child, you know, like it's not, we as adults see a teddy bear, but the girl sees something else. And so it's actually inspired by my own teddy bear. I was working on a manuscript that was similar to it, but I was just struggling with the manuscript a little bit, and then this one landed on my lap, and Jonathan knocked it out of the park. And so I just said, well, then I'm just going to work vicariously through you with your beautiful manuscript. Here's some samples of some ideas that I had. Here's a case where the bear's coming out of a gift box, and then he meets the girl. But there really was something about a mother giving this bear to the girl that I felt rang really true. And just that as an homage to Jonathan's mother, you know, the mom is modeled after Jonathan's mother. And there were some other scenes like so where bear is a bear covered in fuzz and just cozying up to the child, where I selfishly, you know, I reworked the illustration because I wanted to add some memorable things from my home. You know, we have this red rug that was in the house that when we moved to this new house, my wife was ready to throw away. She just wanted to get brand new stuff. And I thought, no, there's some memories in this. This is where our kids learn to walk. You know, this is where our kids spend a lot of their time playing, you know. And so to this day, I still have, you know, the rug in the studio. It completes the space, like the dude says in The Big Lebowski. It really completes the room. And that's why you keep the things you keep, because there's a sentimental memory to them. And that is Bear as a Bear. And if you take off the dust jacket, you know, you see these little Easter eggs that I like to put in where the little girl is with the bear, but underneath you realize that it is actually a teddy bear. And that is my sense of home. And that is Bear as a Bear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for sharing. That was great. Next up, we will hear from Leanne Cho. Leanne is a Brooklyn-based illustrator born in Taiwan and raised in New Zealand. She is the illustrator of The Oboe Goes Boom Boom Boom, which was on the Indie Next list, selected for the Society of Illustrators Original Art Show, and included on the School Library Journal, Boston Globe Books, and Bank Street Best Books of 2020 lists. She has also illustrated It Began with Lemonade by Gideon Starer and Newbery Medal winner Erin Entrada Kelly's Lalani of the Distant Sea. She is currently working on 3 more books, one of them being her debut as an author-illustrator. In the picture book, 100,000 Welcomes, Leanne's illustrations and Mary Lee Donovan's words invite young readers on a journey across the globe. Welcome, Leanne Cho.
Hi, thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so I'm Leanne, and I am the illustrator of 100,000 Welcomes. So the book teaches readers how to say welcome in 13 different languages, and I like to think of it itself as sort of like a big welcome to everyone. So welcome, or Huanin, as how you say it in Mandarin, which is my first language. So this manuscript I actually got maybe near the end of the Trump presidency and right before COVID hit. So it was we had had years and years of a lot of like hate and just fear instilled in the like in America, and I just really wanted a message of hope and acceptance. And when I came across this manuscript, I really loved the community and like global aspect of it because so I myself, I'm a really global person because I grew up in Taiwan. I moved to New Zealand when I was 4, and I stayed there for about 8 years, and I moved back to Taiwan. And my first year of college, I was in London, and then after that, I came to New York. So I've just kind of been all over the place, and I recently rediscovered the term third culture kid, which apparently is what I am. And I remember maybe in like 4th grade, one of my teachers was saying that's what I was. I was a third culture kid, but I was really confused. I didn't know what she meant by that. But looking it up recently, so it turns out a third culture kid is when you grow up in a country that's different from your parents, and especially during like your formative years. So because of that, you end up forming a third culture of your own. And usually third culture kids are like really adaptive, and they're really like used to adapting to different cultures. But because of that, they also don't know what to call home. So I think it's funny that I'm here at a webinar about home and community when I've always struggled with what home is. But I was thinking about it more over the past week, and I really think home, for me at least, might not necessarily be the place, but it's more the people for me. It depends on where my family is, like my relative family, like my parents or my sister, or it can be family I've like made along the way with friends or my partner and his family who welcomed me in to their homes during COVID. And I think it's definitely where I feel most safe and welcome. And so when I was working on this book, I really wanted to focus on like the aspect of people and like community and gathering, while like relating to the languages of all these different cultures. And this book was really personal for me, like Dan actually. So my grandma actually passed away while I was working on this book. And one of the languages included is Mandarin. And so I decided to dedicate a page to her. And so actually, let me pull up. So this is actually my grandma on the left, and then I'm the little girl in the pink with my little hair clips, and then my sister, and then my granddad, who also passed away a couple years ago too. So I decided to paint my grandparents' dining room from memory for this Mandarin page, and so this is the dining room, and there's my grandma, and she's made this delicious meal of all these different things. And I just distinctly remember every holiday we would visit Taiwan, and she would make these meals for our family, and then I'd be able to see my cousins and my uncles and aunts again, and we'd just gather and we'd have a meal together. And it just made me really sad when I was working on this book that I wouldn't be able to experience that again because I think the house is sold now, and um, so I wanted to capture that and my memory of it. So for the final spread, I just painted it from memory. And as you can see, it's a lot more colorful and like bright than it actually was. My dad sent me the photo of sent me this photo like a couple days ago, and I was kind of shocked at how gray everything was. But I guess in my memory, it was warm, it was bubbly, it was happy, and it was just centered around food. So I knew that for this book, I wanted to also center it around food. While the main character, I like to think, is the languages and the manuscripts, but like the secondary character is sort of the food throughout all these different cultures. Because I think food is a really good connector for people. It's like without the need for languages. And for me, when I welcome people into my home and I want to build a community, it's always through food for me. I love cooking. So when I like meet people for the first time, I'll like bake cookies to bribe them into being my friend. And So a lot of food is included in the different pages. Like these pages is there's Mexico on the left and then Ethiopia on the right. And they have their respective foods that they're partaking in. And then we have India and Pakistan on the right. And we have chai there, of course, which I had to include with all the different spices. And the fun part about this book is that leading up to it, we see all these characters and they're gathering and they're meeting and they're eating. And then near the end, they all are escaping from the rain. We see all the different characters running towards this house. And then in the book, in the actual physical book, it actually opens up into a big 4-page spread of all of the characters we've seen and all of the different foods that they're eating. And they're all gathering together as one big community and eating together. And for me, that's what family and home and community is. So, and then so because of that, I think that this book is really good for young readers nowadays. I just wanted to touch on, because I think that the way that I was trying to approach this book was to have as many diverse and realistic families as possible. I think that during the past couple of years, we've really come to see that we fear the things that we don't know. And a good way to introduce young readers to things that we don't know is through books like these, where they get to see people that aren't like them, but doing things that they can recognize and they understand. And I think it's really harmful that a lot of media that's out there like tends to look down on other cultures. And I myself have been subject to a lot of like discrimination or assumptions based on my race or my background. And I myself have perpetuated a lot of harmful assumptions about other people. So I think as adults, it's important for us to unlearn such harmful stereotypes and thoughts that we may have that have just stayed with us through media and history and everything we've learned. But I think it's easier for kids because with books like this, then we're starting early by showing them different cultures and different races without like looking down on them or creating like any type of stereotype in their head. But because of that, it was actually really hard to do research for this book. So I thought I would go over like the process for one of my favorite spreads, which is the spread for Indonesia, which is this spread. And it reads, "Hellos and how are yous, ancient and young. I bow to your spirit. Selamat datang." And so when I was doing the research for this, I first went on to Google, of course, and I looked up like Indonesia home. So I was like, okay, I want it to be set in Indonesia and maybe like centered around a home as all the other pages are. But then when I looked, a lot of the homes were like luxury homes or villas or like really traditional like homes that didn't really feel like places that people would actually live in. And I really wanted to capture the way that I captured in the one based on my memory, like the actual feeling of being there. So instead, I went through Google Maps and I spent like a couple hours just touring the streets of Indonesia this way. And I through Street View and I just like walked through it without having to pay for a plane ticket. And this was like also in the middle of COVID. So I really missed traveling. So this was a good way to get around that. And so I would be looking at like the different foliages and the different houses and the colors they use and sort of you can feel the humidity, you can feel the heat in the air. And I really wanted to capture that. And so then I also did research for the different clothings that like people wear. And I really wanted to capture more realistic clothing in this book. I think like traditional clothing is really beautiful in a lot of cultures, but I think it's also not entirely realistic to have everyone wearing really traditional clothing because it's not like if you go to Japan, everyone's wearing kimonos or anything. So I think it was important to like capture just real life, just real families doing real things. And on the right here, I just included it for fun because this is the national dish of Indonesia and it's called tumpeng. And I just think it looks so cool, like that cone of rice. So that it's not included in the Indonesia spread, but near the end, it's actually one of the dishes on the table. And then, so this is one of the early sketches. I like to do my sketches digitally because then I can like switch things around really quickly. And then from there, I go into thumbnails. Then I slowly would clean it up more and more. I knew I wanted the characters bowing at each other. Then this is the final sketch that I sent to the publisher. And then after that was approved, then I like to do a quick color study so I know what colors I want to paint with. And then I start painting, which is my favorite part. And these are actually, I actually paint in watercolor and color pencil. So you could see like some process videos, like a really satisfying video of me peeling tape off and then adding final touches with chalk. And then this is the final piece. And that's my presentation. Thank you guys so much. And I think my time is up. So thank you so much for listening and welcome everybody.
Thank you, Leanne. That was great. A reminder to the audience that if you have questions, you can go ahead and start submitting them, and we will have some time for Q&A at the end. Next up is Oge Mora. Oge graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design with a BFA in illustration. Her debut picture book, Thank You Amu, was a Caldecott Honor Book, a New York Times Notable Book and Editor's Choice, and a Junior Library Guild selection. She is also the author-illustrator of Saturday, as well as the illustrator of The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read. Oge's art now celebrates the loud magic of living in an apartment building with Everybody in the Red Brick Building, with words by Ann Winter. Oge Mora, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Oge Mora, and I'm the illustrator of Everybody in the Red Brick Building, which was written by the fabulous Ann Winter. And this book, we start with this red brick building, and in this building, I'm turning the pages, everybody's asleep. It's all nice and quiet until the baby wakes up. So we see a wah, and until someone else wakes up. And so we see the rock wake up until we find ourselves in a position when not only is the baby up, not only is the parrot up, but in fact, we have, and I just had it open, everybody in this building eventually finds their way up during this night. And it was very interesting thinking about this topic of home and community in relation to this book. And at first you would think, oh, it's because of you're dealing with an apartment. And usually when we think about home, we usually are thinking about a house, you know, with that white picket fence. But I think that there's also something, and it's very easy to draw a house, or it's very easy to draw a red brick building, but it's harder to draw that abstract idea of what we call a home, what we call a community. I think that's that larger, bigger question that was definitely in my mind as I was making this book. I think with every book, you know, you're creating a world, you're creating a space for your reader to inhabit, you're bringing them in. And so you really are constructing a home on a page. And so that's really something that was going through my head. I'm like, how do I make this building, not just a building, but how does it really speak to our ideas of what home is? And I think the first thing I usually think of, or I usually use as an illustrator when I think about this idea of home, or how do I create a home on a page, is color. And I'm a very big fan of color. The thing I love about color is, yeah, we see colors, but we also feel colors, that colors elicit an emotional response in us. If I have something that's a lot of cool tones and it's a very monochromatic palette, that's going to feel quiet or maybe serene. But if I have a lot of brighter colors, a lot that are kind of jarring and warm, that's going to feel a lot louder. And so that was definitely something I was thinking about in this book. But I think the most important color I had on my mind as I was constructing this book is, of course, the red of the red brick building. And originally when I was thinking about this red brick building and what I wanted it to be, I had this idea. I was like, okay, wouldn't it be cool if you like got some like old books? So I like went to my local bookstore and I started getting a lot of red books. And I decided I was going to scan these books into the computer, and then I was going to print them off as papers. And then I was going to cut them into little strips and little tiny bricks. And I was going to use that, like the texture of these books themselves, as my red bricks and make that into my red brick building. And so I scanned them all in, I printed it. I spent days cutting each little tiny brick and gluing it on this large sheet of paper I was working on. And I kind of ran into a snafu. at the end of that, because I glued it and I thought it was done, but I looked at it and originally I see this is pretty red. It's more on the orangey side. Like this is a red. These are all red. But when you put a bunch of reds together, what will happen color theory wise is that they'll seem a lot less red. And so even though these seemed red when I looked at them individually, when I put them all together as these tiny little bricks, it started looking a lot more pinkish and a lot more brown. And I was like, oh, that definitely isn't the warm, inviting, cozy red that I was looking for to create in this book. And so what I ended up doing, and I definitely shed a tear as I did this, as I go through all the stuff that's on my table, is I ended up getting like the brightest red I could find in my paint. And I just painted all over all of those bricks that I had made. So you can't tell that I painted every single little, I cut out every single brick, but I'll let you guys know that I did. And I was pretty happy with how this color turned out, because when I looked at this color and I was touching this paper, I was like, yeah, that's the cozy red. That's the inviting color that's really going to give this book a space and give it this idea of home. I think the other thing that I think of when you're trying to create a home on a page, as I was doing throughout this book, is you need meaning. You know, you need to construct a home with meaningful items. You know, I think that's something that Kevin, Dan had really touched upon, where it's like you have these meaningful items, and these are the things that, and it's not just the items themselves, but it's the memory that you have associated with those items. I think of that even in my home right here, like all the posters that I have on my wall. These are like pictures and postcards and business cards friends have given me throughout the years, and every space I put them up because it for me is a really reminder of what is home. And so like I was trying to construct on the page, and I do that in consideration for the type of papers that I'm using, that I usually have, especially with this book, I have a unique relationship with a lot of the papers that I've used. So for example, I have this paper. This is a paper that I used for the Green Parrot page. I call it the Green Parrot page, but this paper I got from a school. Actually, I had gone to a school visit and they said, oh, we know that you really love paper. And so we saved this paper from this famous cake shop that's near us because we thought you would really like it. I was a little confused why they were giving me this wrapping paper, but I also was super excited to receive it. And so like I used this in this book, and I love that I used some of these materials because they remind me of that moment I had with them, and that this was a paper that was a gift that I promised that I would use it for something special. And I can't think of anything more special than putting it in my work. This is a paper that I use for, I got all my papers out of, did I drop something? Well, this is one of the papers that I used for this book that was for the little girl. She has a little head wrap. I must have dropped the other paper that this goes with, but you'll notice that this pattern, I had made it for my sister's wedding. So it was a pattern that's special to me, but I made the reverse of it for her mom. And so it's a way that they have their own kind of pattern that unites them together. And so that was a special way of connecting them to things. And so, and then sometimes the papers that I'm using in this book are just really just labors of love. You know, like this was a paper that I worked on for a weekend. This is the floor for one of the final pages. And so I had lots of strips of papers that I've assembled over the years, and I cut each one and I glue it down. And it's a really kind of peaceful process as you kind of construct these papers on their own and use them in conversation with the rest of the book. And so I think the thing that I always love is after you have all these moments and these special things with these books that you create, whenever I look back at my books, especially this one, it's kind of like I'm looking through a scrapbook, and I can look at every single piece of paper that I've used in this book, and I can be like, oh, I remember this came from here, or this came from there, or someone gave this to me as a gift. And this really means a lot to me because of this particular reason. And so it's like you're just constructing this really warm, inviting space through those different papers that I'm using. But I think that if there is anything, so you can use color, you can use meaning, but I think the one thing that you must have in order to create this idea of home, you create this idea of community, is you have to have people. You know, there has to be that special attention to the people that you're putting within this building. One of the things that struck me about this manuscript is the names. So there's a little kid in here called Rayhan. There's a kid named Cairo. There's a kid named Miles. And I looked up the meaning of these names as I was making this book, because I was sitting to myself and I was like, who is Miles? Who is Cairo? What kind of things will Rayhan have in his room? What are the things he's uniquely interested in? And trying to kind of think about these characters, and not just as characters, but think of them as real people. And it was interesting that I had that in mind as I was making this book, because I then talked to Anne after the fact, and once the book was done, and she told me that every name in this book, Izzy, Rayhan, Cairo, Miles, Rayhan, they are all names of children that are really special to her in her life. And so she knew that when she was going to have this book come out, that the kids were going to be able to see their names in print in this book and see themselves represented in this book. And so I thought that was a very special, special thought. Especially so, I had a little child in mind when I was making this book. This book is dedicated to my nephew, baby Chijioke, as I call him. And he was a special reason about how this book was possible, because I had done pretty much every page or sketched every page, but I was left with this final sketch for the mom with her little baby. And I knew what was supposed to happen in the sketch, but every time I drew it, yeah, it was a mom and she's holding the child, but it didn't feel real. It didn't have like that life. I couldn't feel the warmth from that bond. And I was like, how many times am I going to draw this? I'm like, do I need to move the head a little? Like, what is up? And so I actually went into some of my photos, and he had just recently been born when I was working on this book. And I was able to fish out a photo of him in the arms of my sister. And that was the photo that I used as the reference for this particular page. And the moment I used that photo, it looked like everything kind of came alive. And I looked at the sketch and I was like, yep, that's the sketch. I think that is giving the feeling of that home, of that welcome, of that warmth, you know? And so, yeah, there are so many ways to, you know, that's definitely was going through my head. How do I make this home on a page? How am I constructing a space for my readers? But it's kind of interesting. I made this book during the midst of the pandemic. I was separated from my family and very close to my family. I was really isolated all by myself here in Providence, Rhode Island. And so I was really grateful for the fact that I had a chance to work on this book, because even though I thought, oh, I'm making this space for my readers, I'm creating this home for my readers, I eventually started making this space for myself, you know, and filling it with things that reminded me of home, reminded me of the things that are really integral and special to me. I think the one idea I had in my head throughout the beginning of this book to the end is I just imagined having an opportunity to have my nephew on my lap. And this would be the type of book that I wanted to read with him and share with him. And so this book is definitely very special to me and full of very special things for me. And my greatest hope for those readers out there, that it could remind you of the special things that remind you of home as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Oge, for sharing your process. That was mind expanding for me, at least. Next up, and finally, we will hear from Kevin Henkes. Caldecott medalist, Newbery Honor author, and Children's Literature Legacy Award winner Kevin Henkes has championed childhood literacy for decades as the author-illustrator of more than 50 books. He received the Caldecott Medal for Kitten's First Full Moon in 2005. Kevin is also the creator of a number of picture books featuring his mouse characters, including Wemberley Worried, the Caldecott Honor book Owen, and the beloved Lily's Purple Plastic Purse. Now Kevin is back with a picture book for the youngest readers with A House, which follows a house through the 4 seasons, asking simple questions to engage conversation between caregiver and child. Take it away, Kevin.
Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you all for showing up today. I'm very happy to be here. I wish we were all in person, but this is the next best thing. What I thought I'd do, this is a book for the very, very youngest, so I thought I would read it, and then I'll talk about my process and tell you what I was thinking. So, A House. And this is my 59th book. And it goes like this. A house. Where is the door? What color is it? Where is the window? What shape is it? A house in the morning. Where is the sun? Is it up? Where are the birds? Are all of them flying? A house at night. Where is the moon? Does it look like the window? Where are the stars? How many are there? A house in the rain. Where are the clouds? Which one is smallest? Where are the puddles? Which one is biggest? A house in the snow. So much snow. Where is the house? A house. Look, here comes a dog. Here comes a cat. Here come some people. What are they doing? They are coming home. A home. And then the last little page, cat. Birds on the end papers. And that is a house. And I thought I would take you through all the steps I took to make this book. And sometimes it's hard to say exactly where the germ for the idea or the kernel, the seed comes from, but I do know for this, and this started before COVID. My wife and I were on a trip, and my wife had a magazine on the airplane. And in the magazine, there was a reproduction of Paul Klee's painting, Three Houses. And I ripped it out of the magazine. And I was so captivated by this painting. I'd seen reproductions of it before, but it really struck me at that moment. And I thought, I want to do a very young book about a house. So the thing that I do next is to write. This is actually my first draft of the book. And it mostly says a house, and there are some birds. I knew there would be birds in it somehow. And I just started writing down ideas. And this is the way that I work. I write with pen or pencil on paper, sometimes a yellow legal pad, sometimes lined paper. Here's another draft. After I got the story sort of to the place where I wanted it to be, I will make some thumbnail layouts. I think we probably all do that. I always get the words to the point where I think they're perfect before I begin drawing, but I'm thinking all the time. And one of my favorite authors and illustrators is M.B. Gosling, and she has said, there's one way for your book to look. It is your duty to find it. And so I was thinking about houses and books that I loved. And these are some of the houses that were inspirational to me. This is The Little Family by Lois Lenski. And I love this book. I love the shape of it. I love the size of it. Another book that I looked at was a book called The House Variations in Four Colors by Louise Marie Cumat. It's French, but it's wordless. And it's an accordion book. And it's just the shape of a house with four colors and all the variations. And this book made me think that I wanted to do a book that was square. Another house that I love isn't really a house. It's a stable. This is Maurice Sendak's illustration of the stable in Charlotte and the White Horse by Ruth Krauss, one of my favorite authors. And I love this house. And up until this point, I was thinking that my house would have a triangular shaped front, the way a child might draw a house. But I love this house because it was a view in which the roof is a nice horizontal. Another house that I looked at and loved is from Francoise, the Thank You book. And a little house in the background of one of her illustrations, again, with the roof shown in a view that in which the roof is horizontal and texture on the roof. And lastly, this Mary Blair illustration from the book Baby's House was very instrumental in my house. So I began working on sketches, and first I had the triangular shaped house. And I have probably hundreds of sketches. Those are some of them. I started thinking about color. I knew I wanted a limited palette, and I ended up deciding that this is what my house would look like. When I was thinking about the people, and of course the subtle message in this book is that it's people who make a house a home. I decided that because it is a very, very young book, I wanted the people to be figurines. And I was thinking about my book, Waiting. And so I drew some sketches of some people. And I decided at a certain point that what I really wanted was to make them as simple as possible. So I made their arms and hands much simpler. And then I decided that I would get rid of them completely. So the people would have no arms and legs. The animals would not have tails. And I was thinking about how like one could tumble stones in a tumbler. And by the time you're done, everything that's there is necessary, but there's nothing there that isn't. And that was the way I decided to go with this book. When I'm working on this part of a book, which is actually my favorite part of bookmaking, figuring out what words will be on what page, figuring out what the book will look like. I think of a couple of quotes. One is from J.M. Barrie, who says, "Cut it in half and leave nothing out." And I love that. And another is, again, from M.B. Goffstein, who says, "You should work and work until it looks like you didn't have to work at all." At that point, I make a more finished dummy. To size. And I was thinking about the colors. I wanted a limited palette. I decided that I would just use 5 colors. These were the colors that I used. I tried lots, and this is what I came back to. And these were the 5 colors that I used in my book, A Parade of Elephants. So they were familiar to me. They felt like home. And like Oge has said, I do think of a book as being a house. I mean, it's something that you build. You have an idea, you have a blueprint. You, I think you dig your emotional foundation. You layer it with details and with precision and with clarity. I always try to stay true to my private vision. And I'm mindful of the beauty of form, and I love the form of a book. I love having the pages, and I love what that does. Some of the things that I was thinking about were, I wanted to make it as simple as possible. So there's no color in the sky, except for the sun and the moon and the stars. And I have those relationships where I talk about the colors and the shapes. And there are some in the pages that are not in the words. So I'm hoping that perhaps the reader and listener might say, oh, does the door look like the chimney? Is it the same shape? Is it the same color? But ultimately, my goal with this book was to make a picture book in which simply reading the words on the page creates a dialogue, an interaction between the reader and the listener. I tried to approximate how one might talk with a child about the illustrations if there were no words on the page, hopefully the book becomes an opening, allowing one to move beyond the pages to something deeper. And again, I think that's what home is all about. It's about the people. It's about the relationships. And that is a house. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And you can stay with us. I'll invite all of the panelists to turn their cameras back on if they like, as we have just a few minutes for Q&A. Again, audience members, this is your last chance to get in a question. Let me just take a quick glance here. So I'll kick things off. I'll start with you, Kevin, since you're kind of warmed up already. Kind of the idea being that part of the reason we're here, I guess, and thinking about home is because our concept of home may have changed over the last year and a half throughout the pandemic. So did you notice kind of in yourself, or did it come out in your work, kind of a change in philosophy about the idea of home for yourself or for those young readers that you're focused on?
Well, my everyday life in the beginning didn't really change. My wife and I, Laura Dronzik, who illustrates books and is an artist, we work at home. So that was normal for us. But I think for a lot of people, home became school, home became work, home was the playground, home was the safe place, home was everything. And not only was it all those things, it meant that there were all these people together in a space trying to make it work in a way that they hadn't before. So I think a home became flexible. One had to be adaptable. And in my own life, at first it didn't change, but we have two kids, 26 and 24, and our daughter was finishing her senior year of college, and our son was finishing his last year of graduate school, and both of their colleges closed down and went virtual. So they both came home and they were doing their classes, online, and we were working and doing our thing. But what became very apparent to me, and what was the silver lining in all of this, I mean, it was a horrible time. And I think, our president was doing a horrendous job at making this all work. But what was the silver lining for us was we had our 26-year-old and our 24-year-old at home with us in a time when they wouldn't have been with us. And we were cooking together, we were eating every dinner together, we were taking walks together, we were making, we were playing cards, we were watching movies, watching way too much TV, but together. And it made me think that that was one good thing that came out of this. And so it really did enforce that idea for me that it is the people. And when I was very young, I used to think that my workspace was sort of sacred and I could never work anyplace else. But I learned that, I could work on the dining room table if I needed to, if someone needed to have the quiet of my space to do a class. That was some thoughts.
I actually want to extend that to everybody. If anyone else has thoughts just about how the last year and a half, if it's changed your process in a way that you noticed or came out in your book in any way, I'm just going to lob that out there.
I mean, I don't know if it was specifically came about I was just checking that my mic was on. I was like,
you're on, you're good.
But I don't know if it's something that specifically was in this particular book, but I had a thought because I just had recently come back to Ohio. I grew up there, and I have my childhood home there. It's also red brick, funnily enough. And I have 7 siblings, so it was it was a very busy, very lively house. But it was weird being there, and it's just my parents there now. I was there because my childhood dog, he was dying, so he was passing away. And so I was there to help with some stuff and things like that. And it was kind of odd being in this house, because I think for so much of my life, if someone was going to say what is home, it would have been that house and being there. But there was something about that house that felt very empty. It didn't feel as comforting as it had felt for me so often for so long in my life. And I was actually rather distressed about that. And I was like, what's happening? What's happening? But then, I have I had an opportunity around my sister's birthday where we were all at one of my sister's apartment in New York. And we had all the air mattresses out and we're all kind of like stacked up over there. And like, it was that feeling again. And it's even when I see only a sibling or two, there's that feeling again. And so it was just, I had been thinking about it, especially because had this topic about how it's exactly what Kevin has in his book, where it's the people that create that home. And even though that childhood home is there and it's not like we changed the paint or anything, it just felt different because like I was just there by myself, but it would feel the same if we were all there, because the fact that we're all here together, that we have those relationships, that we have those bonds, those are what create that feeling of home for us. And it's, I guess maybe that's it, where home isn't a space. Home is a feeling, that can be accomplished in our relationships with other people.
Yeah, that's really nice. Leanne, your angle is somewhat different in that you have a global perspective in your book, which is great, and it's equally valid, I think. So can you talk about kind of how you went about achieving that sort of global community feeling on top of all the individual countries that you were presenting, and I guess why that global community is important to young readers?
Yeah. So, like I said, I feel like I think the easiest part to have it be relatable was like focusing on aspects that we all like partake in. So, like having everybody gathering for a meal, like it's something we all do. And like to kind of, that's why I wanted to center it around food. Because, like I said, I feel like it's another language. Like we don't need to be able to speak the same language, but we can offer food to each other. And so I think the important part is to make sure that I'm not highlighting too many differences in the book, and to focus on like aspects that are similar, and but also to see so that when kids read the book, they're able to look through and spot things that they might be interested in and they might want to learn more about, and also to see other people that look like them or might not look like them doing things that they do too. Because I think that's really important to see kids that might look like yourself and might not look like yourself, but for them to also be the center of the story. I think a lot of books that we've had in the past obviously don't have a very diverse cast of like different body types, different races, like different ages. So I really wanted to like showcase families that like they might not have a mom, they might not have a dad, and like the importance that like you kind of make do with what you have, because that's kind of what I've had to do too. And yeah,
Thank you. And we barely have any time left. Dan, I want to bring you in. Somebody in the chat brought up the idea of the art studio as a home, which I think is just an interesting concept. So I wonder if you can talk about, just maybe tell us about your workspace and kind of how you inhabit it, and maybe a little bit about your process.
I mean, admittedly, I guess I'm known for being a workaholic. So I do spend a good 80% of my life in this place, and integrating myself into a new space here was probably the most important part. I do have a lot of artwork from a lot of fellow colleagues. There's some on some walls over here, but you can see right here. If I show you, I have like a piece from John Clausen. I have a piece from Adele Rodriguez, Caliph Brown, Kelly Murphy, and some other personal works strewn about. And it was this opportunity to kind of feel like you were surrounded by friends, despite the fact that you haven't seen them in the last 18 months. I also have a lot of sentimental items, which I think maybe members of my family scratch their heads and wonder, like, what is this old thing? So, like I still have my teddy bear from when I was a kid, and it is actually still in really good shape. This is so I have a case where I have all my awards, and this is actually this is a little a glass Snoopy piggy bank that I won. This was the first art award that I ever got when I was 6 years old. And it was a prize given to me from the local grocery store. Back in the day, they would do these coloring contests for, seasonal holidays and things like that. So this is actually the very first award that I ever won for anything art related. And as you can see here, my mom accidentally dropped it and she taped it with some, they have acid-free tape. As you can see clearly, this was loaded with acid. So it's like all crusted up and everything. But that's a really sentimental thing of mine. And I'm always constantly adding to the collection. So like one of the most recent additions is this empty bottle of Opus One wine from 1995. My father was a wine collector, and before he passed away, I convinced him to. He died of cancer, and he like had 3 weeks left after we found out his diagnosis, and I quickly rushed home to him. It was the first time I had seen him since the pandemic, and I asked him. I said, "Why don't we go to your wine fridge and open the most expensive bottle of wine that you have, and let's share that, because I think before you leave this world, it would be really great to know what the best wine you bought tastes like." And he was really resistant at first, and I really insisted in saying, come on, let's do this. And he had some friends come over and see him. And I asked his friends, I said, why don't you convince him? And, with a little bit of coaxing, they all agreed. And my dad, he relented. He said, okay, let's do this. I brought out the best glasses. I popped open this bottle of wine, which I eventually found out was like only a second most expensive bottle of wine. It's like an $800 bottle of wine. And I just said, this is mind blowing. Anyway, I remember pouring this glass to my father and him drinking it and just having this moment of realizing that it was the best decision to savor something that he had treasured, because he really was going to just leave this world and not. He wanted me to inherit this and not experience it. And it was important for me to have him experience it along with me. And so this is actually something I truly cherish. It doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but for me, it reminds me of my father, and it holds a lot of sentimental value, and that's home.
Thank you for sharing, Dan. That's beautiful. I can't cry on a webinar. That's not allowed. Okay, folks, thank you all for taking us into your homes and for sharing your processes. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately we do not. So you're welcome to wave goodbye and turn off your cameras. And I will say a few more things to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's see here. In addition to the 4 books that we've been talking about today, there are more. So you'll see some on your screen here that are perfect fits for a unit on home and community. So I'm just going to run them down and introduce you to a few more books on the relevant theme. So we have Thank You Neighbor. Celebrate all the people, places, and things that make our neighborhood special with this irresistible picture book by beloved author illustrator Ruth Chan. We have Helping Hospital. Richard Scarry's Busy World meets the Airport book with a medical spin in this thoroughly modern representation of hospitals. Readers will see modern technology, diversity, and the inclusion of mental health professionals. And that's by Lindsay Ward. There is Bubbles Up by Jacqueline Davies. An everyday visit to the pool transforms into an unforgettable celebration of the underwater world from Jacqueline Davies, the award-winning author of children's classic The Lemonade War, and Sonia Sanchez, the illustrator of Evelyn Del Rey is Moving Away. And finally, on this slide, you see Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. Joanna Ho's tender yet powerful words and Dung Ho's vibrant illustrations inspire readers to recognize their own beauty and strength, igniting a revolution of self-discovery and confidence. Here we have just 4 more. Boogie Boogie Y'all. Author illustrator C.G. Esperanza celebrates the rich culture of the boogie down Bronx through an infectious read aloud beat and colorful illustrations that leap right off the page. With the turn of a page and 2 shakes of a can of spray paint, an epic block party awaits readers in this vibrant picture book. There is In My Mosque, a lyrical picture book by debut author M.O. Yüksel that celebrates the joys and traditions found in mosques around the world, with artwork by New York Times bestselling illustrator Hatem Ali and extensive back matter. Time for Kenny, a vibrant family-oriented picture book from award-winning author-artist Brian Pinkney. This picture book for the very young is full of boundless energy and unlimited love. Finally, Paletero Man, a truly refreshing picture book about determination, kindness, and ice pops, and the true meaning of being part of a community, from Latin Grammy-winning musician Lucky Diaz and celebrated artist Micah Player. So these titles and others will be included in the Edelweiss collection emailed to you following this webinar. All right, so tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. Not yet a subscriber? Pair the page-by-page reading experience of print with the convenience of online access at booklistonline.com and lock in print, online, digital, and archive access by taking advantage of this special webinar offer to get Booklist for only $75. Patron-friendly, librarian-approved, and free with a Booklist subscription. Booklist Reader, our new digital-only magazine highlighting diverse readers' advisory recommendations for all ages, has arrived. To see and share the latest issue, which is currently freely available to everybody, visit booklistonline.com/reader-issues. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. One more huge thank you to our panelists and to our sponsor, HarperCollins Children's Books. This concludes today's webinar.